Hey, welcome to day 54 of our Read the Bible in a Year plan. Today we start the book of Numbers. Now, Numbers is the fourth book in the Pentateuch, or the five books of Moses. In the Old Testament and in the New Testament, you will hear these referred to as the law, or the law of Moses, or even just Moses. Today, the book of Numbers is kind of in a weird spot in these five books. See, Deuteronomy is going to be a kind of a retelling of the law right before Israel really enters the promised land. But Numbers is going to bring us right up to the promised land early on in the book. And then the Israelites are going to fail to go in, and God's going to curse them with wandering in the desert for 40 years before they're allowed to come into the promised land and enter. So the book of Numbers is going to cover 40 years of Israel's history. All of that said, the first two chapters are what we're looking at today, so let's dig in. Chapter 1 starts off with a little bit of setting for us, telling us that they're still in the wilderness of Sinai. So they crossed the Red Sea, they've hung out in the wilderness of Sinai, and they haven't really moved. They've been there for 2 years, and now God is going to have them take a census. And it's hard to not think back to how this started. An old man who had no children and was looking to his hired servant, or maybe the son of his mistress, to be his only heir. And God is going, no, I'm going to bless you with so many descendants. They're going to outnumber the stars in the sky and the sand in the beach or the desert. And so when we take this census, I can't help but think, man, here is God displaying how his promise is coming along. Check out that the size of Israel has grown to where they need to be numbered by tribes that are named after Abraham's great-great-grandchildren. They need to be established by age so that they can define the divisions of the army. Not even just like, hey, we have enough guys to sort of fight a battle, but now we've got an entire army with divisions and battalions and all of the, it's this massive people. They have become a nation, and they are still growing, and they are still moving forward in God's promises. But I think that the reason why Numbers starts off with this census is to establish that God has been blessing Israel, and as they step into the promised land, the blessing and the promise is well underway, and it's a good progress celebration that, hey, look how far we've come. And so even though we have a ways to go, we're making good time. We're doing this. So then the rest of chapter 1 involves naming off the representatives of each tribe, and to show that there are 12 representatives, and every tribe is represented except Levi. And so you have the half tribes of Joseph's sons. You have an interesting count where technically you have 13 tribes represented in this, because Levi is left out of all of these counts because they are not a military tribe. They are going to solely be priests and workers in the temple. And it lays that out later in chapter 1. In chapter 2, we get into the design for the layout of, as they camp, here's how everybody is to be arranged so that it's well organized, because they're heading out to be traveling across the desert. And every time they pick up and move to a new spot and get settled again, can you imagine the chaos of hundreds of thousands of people going, well, I don't know where we go. Where should we set up camp? What should we do? Establishing a clear pattern and administrating it well is just part of one of the many pieces of clear intent and design in what God is doing with his people as he's preparing to bring them into the land. The thing that really stands out to me today is that census, the count that God is having them number and recognize how big they've grown, how much God has already fulfilled his promise. And I believe it's there to be an encouragement as they continue on. Like, I've been with you. Don't forget where you came from as I take you into where you are headed. You can trust God to fulfill his promises. He is good, and he calls us to set reminders along the way, and he calls to mind those things and reminds us of them himself, so that when we are faced with hard things, as Israel will be soon, they can look back at all of the different moments where there are these mile markers of the progress they've made as God has continually been faithful and blessed them. And it works the same in our lives. And so I'm challenged to look back and consider where God has already blessed me, how far I have already come since I first met him, since I first was transformed and gave my life to Christ, and now how far I've come and how much farther I have to go. But I have encouragement rather than discouragement in knowing that I'm still not perfect, because I know how far God has already brought me along on this journey. So that's what speaks to me. I can't wait to hear what speaks to you as we read this and as we get into this new book and all of the amazing things that God has for us in this as well. Drop a comment and let us know how God is speaking to you through his word today. Be rad for Jesus.